is Real People, Real Matters with Diana Tulchinsky, and my first guest is Sandy Sheagren, President of the Glenview Art Guild.
Thank you, Diana.
Sandra, please tell me where you grew up in the United States.
I grew up on the northwest side of Chicago, but I've moved to Glenview almost 40 years ago.
Did your parents encouraging like the toolbox for artists, like canvases when you were young, or?
My parents always encouraged any of us to whatever we wanted to pursue, but I had an uncle who was an amateur artist, so he was probably my mentor and coach, and I don't remember necessarily purchasing supplies, but I was always fiddling with pencils or colored pencils as a kid.
Did you go to Sunday school or like private classes?
I was in not private classes. I was in a Catholic school, and so most of my art was involved with projects we had in school or things that I did at home with my uncle. So.
How did you start getting the portfolio ready for college or university?
Well, the college I went to, I didn't require a portfolio. It was kind of a combined art science program, so I never actually put a portfolio together.
Mm-hmm. So how was your years in trying to be a medical illustrator, like the progress or the transition?
Again, it was my uncle who encouraged me to do that because I liked medicine. I'd worked in a hospital as a nurse's aide, and I liked drawing. So he found out about medical illustration as an art program, and which would combine both of my interests. I started at University of Illinois in Champaign, which was one of the 3 or 4 programs in the whole United States. And it was combined art classes, general art classes, composition, drawing, gesture drawing, and sciences. So I enjoyed the sciences more than the art classes. I struggled with the art. It was hard to do it as homework and be consistent about specific things. Most of the drawing I did as a kid, I copied photographs, and I did not do a lot of life drawing. Did
you enjoy the figurative or gesture drawing, that experience?
I did. One of the classes I had, it was one of the last classes I had, we had nude models, and we drew poses, usually quick poses, and we had a sketchbook. And then after part of the semester, we had to add the skeleton into those figures. So from whatever position they were in, we had to put the skeleton in, and then the next part of the course, we had to attach the muscles. And that's when I decided I was going to change my major. So.
Who was responsible for changing your concentration to nursing? Was it family support or your support? Or?
It was actually a high school counselor, because I was frustrated with the art classes, but I liked all of the sciences. When I had worked in high school, I was friends with some of the student nurses and got to observe some surgeries, which I found fascinating. So I was going to stop being an art major and become a surgical tech. And my high school counselor said, well, become a nurse because you could do the same job, and it was a broader field. And then when I went into nursing, I didn't really want to just be stuck in the OR, not talking to anyone. So it was my high school counselor, actually, who suggested that.
Nice.
Yeah, so I changed my major in college after a year and a half to nursing. And then when I finished college, I did 2 years at Champaign, and then I went to a hospital nursing program, and then I went back to U of I to finish for my bachelor's degree.
Oh, so how easy was to transfer the credits and into that?
It was fairly easy. I wound up having a minor in art because my art classes wound up counting towards your electives. And then the science classes, I had already had some science classes because the medical illustration program required you to take anatomy and physiology, biology, so those were all courses I needed for my nursing program.
How long has your career in nursing been?
I was a nurse for 30 years. It's interesting I find it interesting how things happen you're not sure what the reason at the moment. So I would always tell my children things happen for a reason. We just don't always know the reason. And changing my career to nursing served me a lot better raising 4 children. And then as my parents aged, it's also how I met my husband. So that was more useful to me than had I been an artist for 30 years. And now that I'm done working as a nurse, I can devote time to art. And I think that's why I like portrait work and figure drawing, because of the because I love anatomy and interacting with people.
Do you like Monet and Van Gogh? Did that inspire you to go back, or?
I've always liked the Impressionists. It's something about Monet's painting. It wasn't real photorealistic, and I think I paint more that way. Although I paint realistically, I don't paint photorealism. Sometimes I'm a little bit more abstract, and I like to use color to express a mood. I'm interested in how people, how their posture, how their body language, how color affects the mood that you're creating, which is primarily what I'm interested in when I'm painting.
How do you set up a client for drawing, like psychologically, or his body in that time of space of framing him, and even his age? How do you prepare someone?
Well, most of my portraits I've done from photographs, so I haven't had to stage a lot of people other than my children and my grandchildren. And then it was a matter of with the kids, it was taking lots of photos and then picking and choosing what I could use. And I posed my husband and couple of my kids, so I haven't had to prepare an outside person to do that. I studied with Gay Riseborough in Evanston in her studio, and who does a lot of portraits, and she would be working on some commissions and share with us how she posed people, how she did lighting, what was difficult about doing that. But I've never actually had to do that with anyone other than my family.
Okay. Was there a mentor at the Norris Culture Center, like Anne, or?
I studied with Leslie Hirschfield, and it was more of a general course. I was doing watercolor, and we worked on pretty much whatever we wanted to. My biggest mentor has probably been Gay Riseborough when I started studying portraiture with her. So,
okay. Where is your studio located?
Actually, in my house. Once my kids all moved out, I turned a bedroom into a studio.
And what is your favorite medium, like acrylics, watercolor? Or?
Now it's oil. When I went back to studying art, when I stopped nursing, I was working with watercolor. And I found with portraits it was difficult to incorporate the color and the drawing at the same time. So I mostly did pencil black and white drawings for a year, then would add watercolor. And then about 10 years ago, I switched to oil paint. And I find I enjoy that more. Watercolor is very relaxing, but you sit still, and I'm more of a move-around person, and I like the physicality of scrubbing the canvas or the sound of that. And then if you don't like it, next week you can paint over it.
Oh, that's nice. There's no errors.
I did do that one time with the background. I had a background in a painting, and I just didn't like it, and so I just completely painted over it and changed it. So.
Nice. Did you enjoy landscape art, or was it challenging? Or
the first landscape I did, I found it interesting in that portraits and figures were easy because I understood the anatomy. When the first time I did landscapes, I thought, you have to understand a tree. You have to understand water. You have to understand reflections. I did a moonlight painting, and I looked at clouds for weeks because if you don't understand what it is or how it's composed, it's hard to paint it. So I had to study and look at trees and how they grew and that. So, and lighting, but I enjoy doing everything. I think, again, I try to create a mood.
Oh, okay. So, how did you come about with poetry as a journey in your life?
Now that's another one of those, life takes you where you're going to go, and your experiences lead you where you happen to wind up. I always like writing. In fact, when I was teaching as a nurse, I was writing a lot of material for the patients. And I had a few years where I studied poetry. I was into just writing poetry. Again, I think poetry triggers an emotional reaction, so that's why I started writing it. I was involved with Women Made Gallery then. I was taking courses there and some of their poetry readings and just kind of got into it.
Ah, that's nice. Have you ever been published?
I have been published in a few small anthologies, and then Women Made Gallery, in addition to having art exhibits, and they also had poetry readings, and they used to put out a date book. I think that's gone by the wayside with all the computers and phones. But their date book would be a combination of art images as well as poetry.
Oh, that's really
and so one year I submitted a poem. They were short because of the fact the book was a smaller size format. And I submitted a poem that was accepted. So that
that's nice.
was kind of exciting. Yes, it was kind of exciting.
I understand you did a Haiti series about your daughter traveling.
I did. I have a friend who has been doing mission trips to Haiti, and looking at her photographs and listening to her stories, I was very taken by the photos of the children. And I always said, I need to paint them, I need to paint them. And then one of my daughters went in 2009, I believe, and she would take photos based on, she knew this would be something I would want to paint. So when she came back, I was touched more by her stories since she was my daughter.
Yes, yes.
And then the photographs, and I started painting the kids. I was drawn to the kids, something about, I don't know, how the kids looked in the photos. And I was not able to travel to Haiti my own self, so then when I did the paintings, I would give a percentage of the sales to support the mission that my girlfriend does.
What is the organization Little by Little about?
That's her organization. She's a nurse practitioner and a professor at U of I Med Center. And she started the trip initially to be a learning trip for the graduate nursing students and advanced practitioners, and connected with Mountaintop Ministries in Gramoth, Haiti, which is outside of Port-au-Prince. And they went and did a clinic treating common things, skin infections, rashes, things like that, intestinal worms. And it was so successful and so well received that she continued to do those trips, and that's when she established Little by Little. There was an outpouring of support from the North Shore, from friends, from more students that wanted to go, nursing people that wanted to go. At the time my daughter went, she was a social worker.
Oh, that's nice.
And again, she's a family friend, so she knew my daughter, and I had wanted to go, but I can't really go.
Sandra, when did you move to Glenview?
I moved to Glenview almost 40 years ago. My oldest two kids were toddlers, and I moved primarily to be closer to where I worked, which was at Lutheran General in Park Ridge. I had an apartment when I got married, and second time, and we started looking for a house. I would only look in Glenview. I loved the town. It was very family-oriented. We went to all the things with the kids. That was back when the bonfire was Thanksgiving weekend. And I just always loved the community, so I've stayed here.
How did you like the schools when your children were growing up?
There was one reason to move to Glenview was to be in the Glenview School District. Interestingly enough, the location we moved to, we were in the West Northfield School District. But working on the Youth Art Fair that the Art League hosts, we have a lot of connections with the Glenview schools, so with the art teachers. And a lot of the students who participate in the Youth Art Fair are Glenview students. So.
Did you send your kids to private or
No, they're in public school. They're in public school. My daughters went to Regina High School in high school. My son went to Glenbrook South. But they went to public schools, which is the contrary, because I went to Catholic school all my life.
Oh, that was nice.
Yeah, so it was very different.
So were you considered an urban professional that all of a sudden you became a suburbanite, or? Well,
yes. I grew up in the city and always said I was leaving Chicago, and moved out here to the suburbs. My kids only knew suburban life, but the girls who went to Regina had many friends who lived in the city, so they got a little more connected with the city.
Sandra, have you ever traveled outside the United States?
Yes, most of my traveling has been to the Caribbean, but a few years ago we started traveling to Europe, and it was fun going to see some of the master artwork, since that's who I was always attracted to. So.
Have you been to Florence or France or
we were in Florence. I was at the Uffizi Museum, which has a lot of Michelangelo, Da Vinci, Rembrandt. And then we also went to the Academia Museum, which has Michelangelo's David. That was unbelievable. There's the size and the beauty of it. But more interesting at that museum, in the hallway walking up to go to see the David, were maybe 5 or 6 sculptures that Michelangelo had started but never finished. So it was fascinating to look how he would start to draw, to pull a figure out of just this big block of stone. I found that fascinating, the way he started, and he's always been one of my favorite artists.
Yes, very
Just
inspiring to the body. And
because of the
spiritual.
anatomy,
Yes.
right? And he was one of the first people to like work with cadavers and study anatomy so I've always liked his work and Da Vinci's, and it was fun to go to those places and actually see some of the original pieces, which are just, it's like, oh, wow.
Do they have museums that Caribbean or
Not that I've ever been to, so
no.
yeah, not there.
Do you have any tips for future medical illustrators in college, universities, or high schools of any wrongs or in looking for schools or?
Sure. Medical illustration has changed since I studied. When I went to college, it was a 4-year undergrad program, and one was available at University of Champaign. There are only, I think, 4 colleges in the whole United States that are accredited for medical illustration. One of them being University of Illinois, which was fortunate for me. At the time, though, like I said, it was an undergraduate program, and now it's only a master's program. So I believe your undergraduate study needs to be basic art classes, color theory, representational drawing, and then a lot of science classes. So anatomy, physiology, biology. Same would apply for high school students. If they're really interested, they need to study both art and science.
Do you have any tips of how to present your portfolio to the board or to future, I think, professors, or how do you specify like the board and like the presentation and the canvas for that type of work?
I think most of it is done as photographs in a portfolio, which would just be photographs of your work, information about, your medium, what size things are. But I've never actually had to prepare a portfolio, so I would have to go and research it my own self to actually do it properly.
Did you ever want to go back into commercial design or like a Harrington commercial arts design degree? Or?
No, I considered going to the Art Institute to take some of the continuing education classes they had, but you had to present a portfolio and apply to it as college. And then also it's traveling downtown, carrying all your things with you, carrying them back. So I wasn't interested in that. So I took classes more locally. I've taken classes at Noyes. I took some at the Evanston Art Center. I took some at the North Shore Art League. So, and then mostly I've worked with, as I said, with Gay Riceborough in her studio, and with Ann Ponce in her studio in Chicago. She's the one who taught me oil painting.
Oh, so, that's nice. Yeah. That's nice. Do you regret actually nursing or the career change, or do you have any favorable memories of that, or?
No, I always enjoyed. I was passionate about nursing when I was doing nursing, and then when I stopped doing that, I was passionate about doing my art. So I think that where you go with your career is more about what your personal passions are, as well as what you want to work on.
What are your endeavors for your family or retirement plans? Or?
Well, my husband's retiring at the end of this year, so we would like to travel more. I would like to still continue studying art. I would like to paint more and probably do more life painting, since I'm working a lot from photographs.
Do you have any future galleries where your artwork would be held, or?
I will be having an exhibit at the North Suburban Y in September, so I've been trying to work on some new pieces so that I'm not just showing the same pieces of art. I do have a canvas in the Art Post Gallery. They do an inch-by-inch competition every April, and so I was able to pick up a canvas this year, and we'll have one in that.
And will you continue doing your poetry and readings and other situations?
Probably not poetry readings. I was a little shyer about reading my poetry in front of groups, but the Glenview Library a couple of years ago asked me to exhibit some of my portraits with poetry, and so I wrote some more pieces for that.
And how did you get started as a Glenview Art League member and presiding president?
Well, I joined the Art League probably 10 years ago, mostly to have a chance to exhibit work, because unless you have a huge body of work, it's hard to exhibit in a gallery. So the Art League exhibits at local businesses and local merchants, and I joined for that reason. Did not much of anything for several years until I worked at the Summer Art Fair, and that got me hooked with interacting with other artists, the people, the members in the Art League. And it was probably 4 years ago that I became president of the Art League.
Oh, wow.
So
wow, interesting path.
yeah, the more I volunteered, the more kind of involved I got. I started co-chairing the summer art fair, the youth art fair, and then became on the board.
And tell me about your experience with Bob Sherman in the Arts Guild. Was there any fond memories of him? Or?
Sure. The Glenview Art League started in about 1950s, and I don't think Bob was one of the original founders, but he certainly was at the very beginning of it. He did organize the first youth art fair back in the, well, let's see, 27 years ago, and he also was in charge of the summer art fair. So he's been all the offices. He's been president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, head of a lot of the programs. When I came on board, he had been president for a number of years and also became ill. So it was harder for him to act in that capacity. So he became our treasurer, then I became the president. So we worked on the art fairs together, and he then, a couple of years ago, we decided to offer a scholarship through the Art League to high school students planning to pursue a career in art. Part of our mission is to promote the study of art and development of art. So this way we thought we could help a high school student who wants to become an artist.
Oh, that's nice.
And Bob chaired up that committee. We worked on the criteria and applications, and he reviewed the applications and chose our first scholarship winner, which was last year. He passed away shortly before we awarded the scholarship, though, which is unfortunately, but he was quite ill the last couple of years. And in spite of that, he would still come to board meetings. He volunteered at the Youth Art Fair. He was still at everything, even though he most of the time had to have a sit-down job just because stamina wouldn't allow him to do much. But yeah.
How did you like being the president for so many years? The leadership qualities someone's experiencing, looking for that.
I've always liked to organize things, so I think that's part of what I've done with the Art League. Bob had been president for almost 10 years, so whenever you change leadership, there's a new direction, a new energy. So it's been fun, sort of reorganizing some things, changing the way we've done some things, getting more out into the community. That we are members of the Glenview Chamber of Commerce, so by going to some of their events, I've been able to connect with other business owners, let them know what the Art League does, get them to partner with us for some events. Since we're a 501c3 organization, we rely on donations from both businesses and private citizens to continue doing our work. So that's been very helpful, being involved with the Chamber.
Was it your idea, or like I know that some of your artwork was at the book fair or the book?
The book market, that's one of the programs the Art League offers. We offer a chance for artists to exhibit their work in local merchants. The book market is one of our exhibit venues. We've got Glenview Grind, the coffee house, we've got nursing homes, we have rehab centers. We're basically in 13 different places right now. The book market is one of them. So I've exhibited there as part of a group show, as part of the Art League. And then in the summer we have an all-member show. And
what are your qualifications to be a member or leadership for the Glenview Art Guild for future artists or high school students?
There's no requirements to be a member other than paying dues, which are $30 a year. And you could be a member and participate at whatever level you want to. You can do nothing, which is kind of what I did for a few years. You can volunteer once in a while, you can volunteer for short times. The more involved you get, or people who have been in leadership roles tend to be people that come onto the board. And then it's just the energy and wanting to be able to do it.
And what are your scholarships that are open for, I think, young artists or even seniors or anyone trying to get their work out?
The scholarship we have now is a $1,000 scholarship. It's a one-time award, and it's for a high school senior who plans to major in art in college. The requirements are to either be a resident of Glenview, doesn't matter where you go to high school as long as you live in Glenview, or be in one of the District 225 schools. And then it's an application, fill out an application, there's no fee. It's an application, you have to prove where you've been accepted to college as an art major, and send us some images of your work.
Wow, that's nice.
Yeah, and the deadline for that is March 31st, so it's kind of coming up. So,
Thank you for the wonderful conversation, Sandra.
thank you, Diane. Thank you for having me, letting me talk about my work, as well as letting me talk about the Glenview Art League.
Thank you for watching Real People, Real Matters. I hope to see you again.